My guest today is Noor Bin Laden. Yes, let me repeat that. Noor Bin Laden, who is the niece of Osama Bin Laden, who happens to be a Trump supporter. Very confusing. We're going to have a good time today. Noor, thank you so much for being a guest on Valuetainment.
Thank you for having me, Patrick.
So if I didn't know you and if I read about it and I said, let me get this straight, there is someone who is the niece of Osama Bin Laden who is a supporter of Donald Trump. How does that take place?
Well, it's a good thing that, this is a podcast format and we have some time because the story is far from linear. But in essence, my background story is one that has led me to value freedom above all. This was born from the example of my mother, who fought extremely hard to secure both my older sisters and my freedom to be raised in the West, as opposed to Saudi Arabia with our father. And that clash of my life here in the West, as opposed to how my life would have been had I been brought up in Saudi Arabia, is the reason why I deeply value freedom. And we'll get to go into more detail, but to jump to answer your question, as someone who deeply values freedom, that makes me a Trump supporter, a President Trump supporter, as I've been able to witness everything he's done to preserve freedom domestically and across the world since taking office.
Now you got to realize that's very confusing to the average person because you're supposed to hate Trump. You're not supposed to like him. You're not supposed to like anything he stands for, but that's kind of confusing for the average person. However, prior to going and talking about your support for Trump, we'll talk about election and some of the other things that are taking place. Let's move to today. What times we're living in today. We just had the election, and I know you were on Tucker and a few different shows, and you expressed your support for Trump. And obviously, the election happens. Now we have a Biden as the president-elect that many say. Time magazine just came out last week calling him president of the United States, number 46. Cover of Time magazine, they did a special. And right now they're going through a lot of different issues. And Sidney Powell, Giuliani, the lawyers are doing their part to see what's going to happen with Michigan. How do you feel about what's gone on with the election the last few weeks?
So just as an intro, as you mentioned, 33 years and, why I'm speaking out now on the US elections. I came out publicly about 2 months ago, a bit over 2 months ago, and it was really important for me to state my beliefs in terms of why President Trump is such a great president and why we absolutely need 4 more years. And I knew I was going to get an immediate platform simply because of the name that I carry. And knowing myself and my character, I know that if I didn't speak up for what I believe, I wouldn't be able to look at myself in the mirror, because we really are at a crucial moment in time where, it's the tipping point and Western civilization hangs in the ballot, right? And for me, President Trump is the man of the hour that can, keep us on the right direction towards preserving our Western values and our Western ideals and our way of life and our freedoms, right? So this is why I decided to speak up ahead of the elections and specifically on the elections. And so coming back to today, we're the 18th of November, and 2 weeks has gone by since the elections. It's astounding to me that we are now speaking with world leaders, the mainstream media, the Biden camp itself, former politicians, former presidents who are still, working in the shadows, pushing this narrative that Joe Biden is president-elect. He is not. And here in Europe, everybody believes it, because they don't really know about, the US Constitution and the election process. And, they are being misled by the egregious gaslighting campaign of the mainstream media to believe this lie. when in fact none of the states have certified the votes, and this is still very much a question, right? So Joe Biden, first of all, is not yet, or in my opinion, will not be president-elect. The proofs of fraud in so many states is rampant, and keeps coming and is overflowing. And until this is sorted out, we owe the American voter and America in general, the preservation of its constitution and of its electoral system. Who and why? It says a lot, that the Democrat Party is willing to just ram this train through on the tracks. I mean, it's in the interest of everyone, isn't it, to have fair and transparent elections? And if there is, indications of fraud, both camps should want to explore this, right? But it doesn't fit their narrative and their agenda, and the hypocrisy of it all, Patrick, looking at these people, whether it's, as I said, the politicians and, the oligarchs and the stakeholders in this, and the media and the journalists, the blue check Twitter people, who for 4 years undermined and questioned the legitimacy of the Trump presidency, now won't even give, for 4 years, through bogus hoaxes that have been proven to be wrong, now won't even give the courtesy to the American voter of exploring these issues of fraud. It's, to me, this hypocrisy is quite sickening, to be frank.
Noor, why do you think 80 million people, according to AP, Associated Press, why do you think 80 million Americans voted for Biden and they disagree with you?
Well, first of all, I don't believe that number. That's the first thing. I mean, how are we supposed to believe that a man who was hiding in his basement for the whole year, who could barely gather, 50 people at rallies in concentric circles, compared to the images of these MAGA rallies that happened all across the country with floods of Trump supporters gathering to show, they are clearly behind the president and they clearly want for more years. And the numbers just don't add up. When you look at, you say 80 million, we're supposed to believe that this candidate garnered more votes than Hillary Clinton, than Obama, in the previous elections. And you add this, to all the other elements of the voting fraud that is emerging. And as you said, a bit earlier, there was the press conference today with Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell, who is doing both are doing such an incredible job at exposing all of this, but also fighting so hard to preserve America and its democracy, right? And as I said, there are many numbers that don't add up. There are many practices, that don't add up. We know that Republicans, or the people who oversee the elections, weren't allowed in the rooms. There are affidavits of witnesses saying that voting ballots were tampered with. There's just and then the big one. The big question mark of all is what happened with these voting systems, Dominion voting system, Smartmatic, all of this. It smells really bad, Patrick.
Well,
And,
if it's fraud, if there is voter fraud, you have to trust the system to know that it's going to expose it. And if it's voter fraud, if Sidney Powell and Giuliani are the lawyers that they are, they're going to be able to get to it and reveal it. And if they do reveal it and we find out that there's voter fraud, Trump becomes president. If not, Biden is president. Let's assume they don't find anything. Let's assume they don't find anything. And let's assume Biden is president. What's your biggest concern about a Biden presidency?
So first of all, I have complete faith in this legal team. So I'm very optimistic. But the hypothetical that you're putting forward, I think it would be a disaster to have a Biden-Harris presidency, which in reality would be a third um, Obama term in all, logic. We know that, Obama is the first president who didn't leave Washington, I think, since Woodrow Wilson. It's normally common courtesy for outgoing presidents to leave Washington, D.C. And he is the first president in over just under 100 years who didn't do that. And when you look at his role and the role that he's played, in the past 4 years behind the scenes, most egregious of all with this Russia collusion hoax and what they did to Lieutenant General Flynn, you clearly have bad actors who for the past few years, but we can go even further back, but let's stick to the present, time frame. But you clearly have bad actors such as Barack Obama, who have been working very hard at undermining America's sovereignty and standing in the world the past few years. And looking, from afar, because I'm not in America, but observing all of this all play out. And, as you can see behind me, I have the Epoch Times brilliant Spygate poster, which I had blown up and put on my wall. And I encourage all of your viewers to go look at that. And also, if they want to understand really what transpired with what they did to General Flynn and President Trump with this hoax, everybody should watch the movie The Plot Against the President, which is brilliantly made, based on Lee Smith's book. Anyway, all of this to come back, so a Biden-Harris presidency would be a continuation of the 8 years of Obama's time in the White House. And I think it's fair to say, if you know a little bit about foreign policy and the consequences that it's had all across the world, from an outsider's perspective, you don't want that. And they're already talking about, going into Syria, illegitimate, as I call it, illegitimate president-elect Biden's team are talking about, going into Syria already. We have had 4 incredible years when it comes to foreign policy with President Trump. The stabilization of the Middle East after those 8 years of Obama was such a relief to me. You look at the peace agreements between Israel and the different nations in the region. I mean, you weren't born either, but I'm sure you know about, the 3 no's in Khartoum, Patrick, where all the leaders of the Arab League got together and said, no peace with Israel, no recognition with Israel, no negotiation with Israel, right? And to think that since then, since 1967, it's just been conflict after conflict and bloodshed after bloodshed, and President Trump comes in and he was able to bring all these people together at the table to strike peace agreements. And he hasn't started any new wars since taking office, which people, said that it would be the end of the world if President Trump became president. And just I urge people to properly go and research, just in terms of foreign policy, the stark contrast and who at the end of the day ushered in more peace, President Trump or Barack Obama. And then obviously we can get into also everything that's been done in terms of domestic policy, which has really benefited the American people the past 4 years. But there's just the list, as I wrote in my letter to America, in a more succinct way, but the list is quite long of Trump's achievements in retrospect after 4 years. And I understand why the American people, over 70 million of them, would like 4 more years of President Trump. I'm not American, and I want 4 more years too.
Here's my question for you. If Trump was able to do what he did, what he did with UAE and Israel, 25 years, flight, Kushner was on it, unbelievable, history in the making, something nobody expected to happen. Why is
History in the
Netanyahu,
making.
yeah, why is Netanyahu going out there and congratulating Biden on his being a president-elect while this took place with Trump, and maybe he could have waited to say that? Why is Netanyahu becoming so friendly with Biden so quickly?
That's a good question. The first wave of world leaders who congratulated illegitimate President-elect Biden were Trudeau, Macron, and Boris Johnson, which already was quite, shocking in and of itself. And I believe Netanyahu's message came a couple of days after, but apparently, I think as of yesterday, he retracted and came out stating, that we had to wait and see what happens with this fraud things. But it's quite telling.
Saw that.
One thing that is positive throughout this whole process, for me, is that it's exposing a lot of what is wrong with the system and who is part of that said system and who is not. And I'm very encouraged, to see, the leaders of Hungary or Poland or Brazil, even the president of Mexico refused to congratulate fake president-elect Biden. So I think a lot of things have been revealed in this process, which undoubtedly needed to be brought to light in order for a full cleanup to take place. And this is what I'm looking forward to. I have faith, that the proof will be taken to court and that it will be irrefutable. And the process, which I described in my letter, of these forces that have sought to undermine America for decades, entering, like a Trojan horse and eroding her from within through all the different realms of society, governmental and intelligence agencies, but, through the society, whether it was media, entertainment, news, the media culture, where you've had people very intent on bringing America down. And this is the main reason why I support the president, because I truly believe that this is what he set out to do, is to clean out the deep state, the swamp, the globalists, the cabal, whatever name you want to call them, but people who, for their own reasons and for their own personal benefits, need for America's standing to be brought down to the level of certain other nations.